Welcome to the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, where you will learn top strategies from world-class real estate investors, both large and small. Why not? Tune in and get started today.
Like, what are all the things that I've done in the real estate game? What did I like? What didn't I like? And how can I double down on the things that I actually enjoyed doing? And the things that I enjoyed doing, I think, were the development side. I think it's a lot of fun to see something come from nothing, and to go put some plans together and see that come to be. So I think I'll still leave an opening for like development opportunities, but I think I'm trying to go full scale, like full focus on the larger multifamily apartments. Larger, I mean, larger is relative, but I'm saying anything five and over right now, maybe between 5 and 50 units. Ideally, I'd like to be between 50 and 150 units. I'm trying to target direct to seller opportunities, and I found that could maybe the best use of those efforts would be maybe between in the 5 to 25, 5 to 30 range of units, because those are usually the ones that are going to be owned by an individual mom and pop, versus the largers are going to be owned by some LLC or whatever. So I just think that just because I'm trying to do the direct to seller, I think that maybe aligns better with that. But I would like to see myself eventually get into the larger 50, 100 units.
Hey, what's up, all of my real estate peeps? This is Brian Lucier with another episode of the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, where we interview everyone from billionaires to beginners, where we believe investing in rental properties, multifamily, is one of the best asset classes in real estate. Although on several shows, I've been teached up and learned some new tricks myself. So always a pleasure to get onto this show, interview nice guests who I get to learn something from. And today, this is really fun. I'm part of Nick Alrud's Monday Morning Manifest group, and I met this gentleman on there, and he found out that I figured out how to work remotely. So we wanted to hook up where I could answer some of his questions. He's got some aspirations to live on an island. What a wonderful idea. So let me introduce him. Our guest today has closed over 200 real estate transactions. 60 of those were projects directly owned and operated, including rehabs, new construction, additions, the BRRRR method, if you're familiar with Bigger Pockets, producing a total of 153 units with 85 rental units in that package. In aggregate, over time, over $40 million of real estate projects over the course of his career. Pretty impressive numbers. He got his start in real estate as a real estate agent back in 2006 while attending UMass Boston. Experienced the 2007-2008 global economic meltdown downturn, we all did, was an eye-opening experience teaching him many valuable lessons. Today, he currently holds, I was so proud of this, his Massachusetts real estate broker's license and his GCSL, General Construction Supervisor license, and a Bachelor of Science in Finance and an Economics minor, all from UMass Boston, class of 2009. Born in Boston, Mass., he was raised 10 minutes away in Chelsea until the 6th grade, when his parents parted ways and sent him to live with his grandma in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. Living abroad exposed him to his uncle's entrepreneurial spirits. What a blessing. And it was overseas where he started to think differently and had the idea of someday owning his own business and his own real estate. Inspired by real estate, he's always felt a deep love for beautiful architecture and a sense of connection to buildings. After obtaining his real estate license in 2006 and years of assisting clients in identifying, evaluating, buying, renting, and selling their properties, he started on his own mission to buy his own properties in 2010. At the age of 24, please, he's purchased We had a talk before the show. You'll find out more about it. But at the age of 24, he purchased his first multifamily, a three family, and then another one in 2013. Helped by his uncle with the rehab of his first property, he gained even more valuable experience as a real estate entrepreneur. After college, he went into the corporate culture, but still maintained his passion for real estate part time until June 2015 when he returned back to real estate full time, where he left behind a stable six-figure software sales job, all in the middle of planning his wedding. How do you do that? And that's how Edge Real Estate Investments LLC was born. It's been an 18-year journey in real estate, 14 years of landlord experience, 9 years of rehabbing, repositioning distressed properties. The knowledge and diverse experience he's acquired over the years has led to many interesting stories. I'm sure that 14 years of landlords, right? So here he is today. Now he leverages his experience and is pivoting into distressed C-class properties near emerging markets. The goal is to capture growth from the primary markets and leverage technology to force appreciation through rehabs, rent, and property improvements. Ladies and gentlemen, all of my real estate peeps, rock stars, and entrepreneurs, it is my pleasure to welcome to the show today real estate developer, investor, and founder of Edge Real Estate Investments LLC, Joel Rubiera. Joel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Brian. It was interesting to have someone read all those stats back to me. I was like, is he talking about me? I don't know. It's yeah, it's nice to hear that um when you hear those stats back, every day you're like kind of focused on what's happening that day, solving problems. So to kind of look at the big picture of what you've done, and when you look back, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, so everybody just joining us on the show now, Joel and myself, we were having a nice little chat to get to know each other before, and he held up Dan Sullivan's book, The Gap and the Gain. And here it is, right? This whole bio shows the gain. Where are you today, right? We can always look forward and say, well, I want to do this and I want to do that and want to do this. But, every now and then it's good to just stop, take a breath, enjoy where you are in the present. And yeah, the whole intro was you and it was your story. So thank you for sharing your story with us. So Joel, if it's okay with you, I'd love to jump right in and let's get started.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the bio answered some of these questions, but just in case I missed anything, what did you used to do before becoming a real estate investor?
So before becoming a real estate investor, I was a real estate agent. That was like kind of my first real estate job. Primarily, I was doing rentals, helping people with, I never done real estate before, so it was like the brokerage at the time that I was working with. Shout out to Madeline Garcia Real Estate, actually out of Chelsea. So to get my feet wet, I started working with rentals, and they had a physical location, so people would come in, leads would come in, and I would be able to sit with some of the other agents to kind of learn a little bit about the transaction and everything real estate as far as like how to buy a property, at least from the client's perspective, or what they were looking for. And that was very helpful because that was my first kind of peek behind the curtain on the real estate world. So through that, I got to make a lot of good relationships with like mortgage brokers, real estate attorneys, appraisers, home inspectors, and learning where they all fit in the process. So that was very a very good experience for me. And yeah, I was doing all that while I was in college. So naturally, when I graduated college and I got my degree, I was like, all right, I want to use this thing. Right. So that's kind of where and also there was actually a second reasoning why I wanted to go into the corporate world. At the time, I don't know I think they still do this today. When you graduate from college, you could use your offer letter to qualify as your last 2 years of income when you're going to get approved for a property. And with real estate, you're always as an agent, I was working full time, so my income wasn't that high because I was always deducting expenses. So you're always trying to minimize, and report as much expenses as you can to minimize the taxes you're going to have to pay. So I didn't really have the financials to qualify for a mortgage until I found out about that option, that program that they had. So when you graduate, you get a full-time job in your field, you get an offer letter that qualifies you for your 2 years of income. So that's exactly what I did. I got a job at the bank as a banker, and immediately went for my first three family, and that was around I think 2010, 2011. So I house hacked my first three family then.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. And yeah, I mean, so many people say, "Well, I want to do real estate," and they quit their day job. And you had the vision and the common sense to know that you were lendable because you got the job.
Exactly, exactly.
So
And then I didn't want to stop there. I wanted to buy again. So I said, well, I can't leave my job now. I have to kind of stick it out for a few years while I can maybe accumulate a few of these. Because I had at least known enough that, if you wanted to leave your W-2 job, you definitely want to make sure that your rental income is enough so that you would qualify for the next property. And I definitely wasn't there yet. So that's why when an opportunity came to jump from the banking world into like a software sales role, compensation was good and the company culture was excellent. I took that chance. So I was, making more money. It was a much more fun environment than the bank, and but that was fun for a short for it was fun for its time, but in the back of my mind I kind of always wanted to get back to doing my own thing, which was real estate, and that's how I ended up finding my way back.
So when you jumped from the bank into the software position, did that supercharge your purchases? Were you making more money? Did you buy more properties?
I was making more money. I ended up buying a second three family. um so yeah, the answer is yes. I mean I was doing it in a very traditional way where you save up for the deposit, and you buy you buy the property. Fast forward a couple years later, then I started learning you could leverage and partner with other potential investors where maybe you didn't have the capital, but you could use their capital, maybe pay them some interest on it, take it on as debt, or maybe even like as an equity partner, and buy a property if it was profitable. There's enough people out there that would take you up on that offer. So I started learning more about that towards like 2014, 2015, which is around the time when I left and started going out on my own.
Okay, so I'm gonna spin back to your uncle because that part of the bio is really intriguing to me. 6 years old, you find yourself in the DR, and I'm assuming here that well, let me just ask the question. What influences did you have growing up that would have led you to real estate? And it sounds like your uncle from your bio was pretty entrepreneurial. Could you tell us what that was like and what your uncle was doing and how that affected you?
So when I went to the Dominican Republic, I was a little older. I was in the sixth grade, so I was probably around 10 years old. Um, and I left with my brother. So my parents had gotten divorced, and my grandma had offered to take us just while things like settled down. And that's what they did. They sent us with our grandmother. It was supposed to be temporary. We ended up staying there long term, as we all know now. So I finished middle school there, and then eventually high school there.
Oh, wow.
Um, I would go always back and forth between. I initially left to Santo Domingo, and then I would always go back and forth to Santiago, which is like another city in the Dominican Republic, about a 2 hour ride. And that was where my other grandma lived. So that's on my mother's side. So Santo Domingo was my dad's side. Santiago was my mother's side. So every time I travel there, I'd have a lot of fun because I had more cousins on that side in Santiago, and my uncles were all. My mom has probably like I think it's seven or eight siblings. About five of those are the brothers. They all had something going on. They all owned business, so a restaurant, a hotel, a gas station. And there was always something to do. If it was not with the cousins, it was with the uncles, going to their business, or they were taking us out to, whatever event. Long story short, there was always something happening over there. So that kind of and the fact that they kind of I got to admire how they ran their own business and they controlled their own time, even though they were working a lot of the time. But it was nice to see when they wanted to take time out and come hang out with the family, or even just me as a younger kid being able to go visit them at their place of business. That was always kind of very impressive to me. The fact that they own that business, they own that property, they own their time, and that always resonated with me. And I think that's probably part of the reason why I ended up actually moving from Santo Domingo to Santiago was to be closer to the uncles, and in doing that, I got to work with them in some of their businesses, and this was like me in high school, right? So I'd have like the odd job with them, but it was very important for me to learn how, to keep a job and work a 9 to 5, but also learn the back of the business because in talking with them, they tell you what was going on, or you learn to look at it at a different way, like from an employee mindset to an owner mindset, and how that's different. So that was
So they
pretty
definitely
cool.
planted the entrepreneurial bug in you. Now, businesses, gas stations, restaurants, were any of your uncles involved in real estate as real estate investors?
So they had businesses that they owned the real estate of, but real estate was never their primary business. Um, the real estate, actually, the real estate, I think I got that from reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. And then also in high school, one of my friends, his dad actually, they lived like in quite a nice house. And I remember asking him, what is his dad doing? He was like, oh, he's in real estate. And I was like, oh, light bulb moment, reading the Rich Dad Poor Dad. And then my buddy's, his house is pretty cool. His dad's in real estate. So I started to connecting some dots. I knew I wanted to do my own business. So that's kind of when I started to shape, that real estate could be a possibility. And then contrast that with my parents, love them to death, but they were working the 9 to 5 here in the US. So contrasting what their life was like versus what like my uncles were as entrepreneurs and controlling their own time. My parents would be able to come see me if they had enough vacation time, or enough saved up to make that trip versus my uncle on the other side, they would just take the time. If they needed to take the time, they would take the time. My dad worked for a company for like 20 years in downtown Boston and eventually was let go. Not much to show for it. So that was also like, a big eye-opening experience, right? Because you think, oh, if you spend all this time, if you have a 9 to 5, it's safe, and you spend all this time with a company, eventually it'll work out. And it's just as risky, if not more risky, because you're putting your kind of your future in the hands of someone else. So I think that contrast, as more than anything else, showed me that I was like, okay, I definitely want to be in a situation where I'm running some sort of business that's my own. I used to joke that even if it was like a hot dog cart, I wanted to have my own thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that's good. I'm glad you were able to fill in the blanks there and make that comparison. And nothing wrong
Hope
with,
I didn't go too long.
sorry?
Hope I didn't go too long. Start yapping away.
No, no, no. This is your show. I'm going to ask the question and just let you run wild. If you bring me down the rabbit hole, I'm going to follow you down. That's fine. There's no structure here. We talk about whatever you want. It's your show. So, looking at your notes again here, 18 years. That was back from when you purchased your first real estate property 18 years ago?
I would count that from when I got my real estate license. From back in 2006, just because I was like, even though I wasn't buying my own, I was still involved in other transactions. So whether I was representing a buyer or a seller, because I started as learning the rentals, but it quickly, like within months, I was already dealing in you know uh, helping represent people as a buyer or a seller's agent. So that was like a nice um, tutorial, like, or how to on how to buy and sell real estate and how to evaluate it and what's involved, even just like the day-to-day stuff. Like you buy a house, someone who hasn't bought a house before doesn't know you actually have to go, there's going to be not only is it the mortgage and interest, but there's a water bill, there's a trash bill, there's a sewer bill.
Yeah.
You got to change, you got to update your contact information at the local town office and all that stuff, which they should do at the closing, but sometimes they don't, so you got to follow up with that stuff. So all the little like details that you don't know until you actually do it. So those things started coming in early.
So you were cutting your baby teeth learning all the stuff that later you would not have to learn when you became the guy buying the stuff. So 18 years started back as realtor broker. Was it 14 years ago you started buying your own properties? Is that about right?
It was about, I'll tell you, I bought my first property in 2010, so I was about 15 years ago.
Okay, 15 years
And then
ago.
I started about 10 years ago investing full time.
Okay, so yeah, there's always that transition. I don't think I've met anybody yet who just like from day zero went from 0 to 100 miles an hour. It's always, that transition. So,
And there was pockets there, like there was the last few years, I was going at 100 miles an hour, and now I'm like in a transition where I'm kind of like I've hit a reset and I'm trying to pivot into multifamily. So I've kind of like taken my time to figure out how do I want to do that, how do I want it to look going forward? And it's tough to answer because there's so many ways you can go with real estate, as it always goes. There's so many ways you can go. It's like you get dizzy if you think about all the ways you can do it.
yeah, the next bright, shiny object.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I tell this to my sons all the time. Investing is boring. You find that one thing you do better than anybody else. It doesn't change much. A good investment, if you know what you're doing, is boring. I mean, it can be exciting to do it. I love that part of it. But for me, real estate is a slow moving train. You can watch the cycle, know where it's going. It's got to come around that curve. It's got to go up and it's got to go down. It never breaks from the cycle. It can't go from 1 to 3. It always has to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So once you understand that, and that's in any type of investment, they all have cycles. Some of them a little bit more crazy and volatile, but real estate is easy and slow. I like real estate. So 15 years into the game, here's where I like the time machine question. I have fun with this one. So, Joel, if you could go back and tap yourself on the shoulder 15 years ago, this question has two parts. What advice would you give to yourself starting over? And now here you are, 15 years experience, 19 if you count being the broker agent. What experience would you give to that newbie who's starting out today? Well, let's start first with you. If you could go back in time and tap yourself on the shoulder and give yourself some advice, what advice would you have given yourself starting over?
Oh, I feel like that's a multi-point answer. I'd probably do a couple things differently. I would say get a coach as soon as possible. If I had to do it all over again, I would say I would have focused more on multifamily investing, like rentals, and maybe started doing like BRRRR or value add sooner. Because when I started, I was doing a lot of flips, which was great. It taught me a lot. I ended up doing permitting and development, and all that was fun. But at the end of the day, you bought those properties, you fixed them, you sold them, they're gone. They would have been here, they would have spitting out some cash flow, they would have been appreciating, would have been able to do some interesting tax deduction stuff. So I think looking back and all the property that I sold, if I still had those properties, I mean, at the time, hindsight's 2020. And at the time, if you sold, it's probably because you needed to sell, maybe, for the most part, because that was the game I was in. Um, But if I would have structured them differently, meaning with just the mindset going into it, or maybe even with the investors, like, hey, this is something we're going to be holding long term, or even like something that you commented before, like go large sooner, go bigger sooner. That was very intimidating to me. Now I'm trying to pivot into looking into larger multifamily properties. And if I would have like maybe spent that energy sooner on the multifamily property endeavor, I would have maybe been further along at this point in my career, at least on the multifamily front, owning X and owning doors and having a better cash flow. So I would say that the coaching, maybe doing more multifamily sooner, larger multifamily sooner, and another thing, systems. I never took the time to until now. I mean, I'm taking that time now, but I was just going fast, shooting from the hip. And I wish I would have invested more time in learning how to put things into a system. Because there's a lot of things that I've done that I wish that if had I put it into a system then, it would have been a whole other world I would have been living in now. Yeah.
I mean, you're singing all the right songs here. And I got to give you props because the people watching this show don't know. You're 39. I didn't start investing in real estate till I was 38. So, you're going back 15 years from 38 or 39, whatever it is. You're 24, 25 years old. You started at 24, 25 years old. That is phenomenal. Your trajectory is going to blow mine off the chart.
That's
Just from
that's encouraging. Thank you.
well, you had said that, going bigger was intimidating. I said, okay, so maybe 15 years ago it was intimidating, but right now, maybe not so much. I mean, you're 1 year ahead of where I was, and I was intimidated by going large. So in 1 year, you've blown 15 years past me. Isn't that nice?
That's crazy. That's crazy when you say it that way.
But it's true, right?
Yeah, that's
True.
that's pretty cool.
You can never compare yourself and your journey to somebody else's journey because you're on your own journey and you're doing fine. And one of the things that drew us to each other, Joel here wants to do operations off of an island, and that's how we ended up hooking up. And it's like, wouldn't it be wonderful at like 40 years old, you've carved out a lifestyle for yourself and your family where you've got that life balance, everything's working out, you're going to build your systems, you're going to add to your portfolio, you're going to increase I mean, this is all going to happen. It's there's no reason it can't happen. There's no reason it won't happen because you're already sitting there. You've already got your big beep calendar 2025 goals on the background there. So yeah, you're already there. You're just taking the steps one day at a time, and that's fine. This isn't it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. You're in for the long term. So now we've gotten
One thing I want to jump in
sure.
and interrupt you for a second there because I want to like expand on that, and you're so right. I mean, and it's a constant challenge. I think the key is like reminding yourself that that's the case, right? Because if you had, if a younger you, a buddy of mine said this, it might have been Mike himself, but if a younger you would have like paid money to have the problems that the older you has now, right? Like the stuff that you're involved in, the deals that you've done, like if I had to start from scratch now into the game of thinking it that way, like if I had to start now, like you're saying you started at 38. So if I had to start day one real estate at 39 with all this experience that you have now, it's like, wow, if you look at it that way, it's actually quite awesome that you have all this life ahead of you and you can, and you're going in with all this knowledge. So you really should take advantage of that. And like you said, pat yourself on the back and kind of like say, it's going to be okay. It's going to work out. It's, you're right where you need to be, that type of, because it's like the gap in the game, really talking about that. You can easily get in your head, at any point and kind of like knock yourself off the tracks for a little bit.
Yeah.
What you said is important. I just wanted to highlight that again.
Well, I brought it up because your story shows it. So here we are. We've got that newbie watching this for the first time, says, wow, Joel's crushing it. He's doing all this stuff. He's going to move to an island. You've gone back, tapped yourself on the shoulder, gave yourself some really good advice. So now we got the newbie on the fence looking at this for the first time, hasn't done their first deal, trying to figure all this out. Should I do it? Should I not do it? What advice would you give to that newbie who's starting today?
I would start wholesaling, looking at wholesaling very aggressively, because if you control the deal, then you control everything else. And wholesaling is a great way to get into real estate, control, because you don't have to buy the property, but you can control the contract or the right to buy that property. And then you can, through that, get to know other investors that are eventually going to buy that property from you. You can make some money and create a great network of other buyers that you can learn from. And also with wholesaling, if you want to roll up your sleeves, you can really do a lot without having to spend a lot of money. You can go get a list, at the county or research one online and just start, skip tracing and calling people, or I would say direct mailers, but maybe you would build to that because you got to spend some money on that. But I would say you can get a list for free most times, and then just, you might have to spend a little money to get the skip tracing, but then you can just call and try to get in front of some homeowners that need to sell, and hopefully you're there and you can position yourself as like maybe you're not buying it, but hey, I'm working with investors, I'm working with buyers that would be interested in this property, and that could be your inroad into the real estate world.
So as soon as you turn the corner into the real estate world, there's like industrial, commercial, residential, so many different flavors just under the real estate roof. You know, you could say you're a real estate investor and have two people in the room doing totally different things. So, what other advice would you give to that newbie at that point?
I would say, as far as you mean, like just like what way to go with all the different asset classes, or you mean just in general?
Well, you've given them a starting line, wholesaling, control the deal, networking, leveraging your time based on meeting sellers, buyers, all that. Where do you
Get
go?
a CRM. Get a CRM. I wish I did that. Even a free one. I'm sure there's free ones out there. I was, putting all my contacts in my phone, which is fine until you need to like reach out to a bunch of them at the same time. Then it's not so fine. Then you got to do it one by one.
So you've got that newbie on the fence who said, "Wow, that sounds really important. What's a CRM?"
Yeah, it's a relationship management tool, customer relationship management. You can Google CRM or free CRMs, and I'm sure some options will come out. It's a way for you to house essentially all of your contacts, and they can be potential targets. Like if you have a list, you can upload it to the CRM and track the progress. Like you've reached out, you haven't reached out, did you talk to them? What were the notes? You could also upload lists for potential cash buyers that you come across or lenders, and you can track these lists separately. And the cool thing about CRMs is you have all these options. Then you can introduce like drip campaigns, which means it's like automated messages at certain X amount of time for whatever list you're trying to target. And that takes a lot of the stuff. It automates the things that you should be doing, which is like following up with people. Following up is really most of the work is because you're going to call people and they might not be ready or they might not answer. It's how many times can you follow up to try to get in touch with that person is going to determine whether you get the deal or not.
It's customer relationship management,
Yes,
emphasis on relationship.
100%, 100%. Again, that's probably, I would say one of my biggest regret is not starting a CRM sooner
Well, you know about it now.
because I know about it now. Exactly. Yeah. I would say that would be that would be like the easiest no-brainer thing to do is to keep all your stuff in a CRM just because it just makes life easier going forward, especially as you start meeting people and networking and now you have hundreds of contacts or buyers potentially. And how do you keep track of all these people?
Wow, really, really good stuff. I mean, I think I've done over 100 shows, and that might be the first time anybody brought up a CRM. I think Andrew Freed may have brought it up, but yeah, that's a really good point. And anybody who's watching this, like you said, do a free Google
I
search.
think it's a sleeper. It's a sleeper for any business, really. Like a customer for any type of business, not even real estate. Like you should have a CRM because it's just, it's just, when I realized, when I had that moment, like I'm an idiot. I should have done this sooner. It was when I had a deal that I wanted to wholesale. I had it under agreement. And then I'm like, I know I have a bunch of cash buyers because there's also people that I've bought stuff from. So I'm just going through my phone, and then I curated this like this text, and then I'm copying and pasting one by one to like dozens and dozens and I'm like, I'm an idiot. I was like, I should have had I should not be doing this right now. This is unacceptable. I should have had a CRM.
Well, I mean, there's that old story of the hound dog crying on the porch, right? Neighbor
Yeah.
goes by every day for a week, and dog just sits there crying. Finally, he knocks on the door and say, "Hey, Mr. Farmer, how come your hound dog's always crying on the porch?" He says, "Because he's sitting on a nail." He says, "Well, why doesn't he get up?" He says, "Because the nail doesn't hurt enough yet."
That's a good one.
So, we're all at that point, right? We will make the change when the change we make is less painful than the circumstances we're in. So,
Yeah.
so I don't think I've asked this. What types of deals when you were starting out were you doing? You were saying some rehab, some fix and flips. Was this primarily single family homes, stuff like that?
Single family homes, that's mainly what the focus was. As I progressed, I did bigger and more complicated things. But it started with single family homes.
So
Um,
give me the spectrum, the gamut here. Single family all the way to what's the wildest, craziest?
the single family home rehab, and then I did a 20 one other thing. So I did a 20 unit apartment building in Mass, Lowell, Mass. That we essentially it was a fire job. It was got burned in a fire, so we had to do a full gut rehab. And then after that, get the sign off, the certificate of occupancy, and then start renting it. So that was a full, I went through a full cycle with that one, which was like a larger 20. That was probably the largest property that I had owned at the time, the 20 units. And I was managing them, and I was like, this is exactly the same as me managing 3 or 4 units. And I was like, this is it's not that scary as I had painted it. And obviously, as you scale, then the problems multiply. But I was like, oh, this is it's really the same, the same. So that was an eye-opening experience too. But the gamut ran from uh, one, and I was doing a lot of 1 to 4, too, 4 families. And I would fix them up, sell them. On occasion, I would keep them as a rental for a year or two and then sell them. I also bought land to develop, so take through zoning and permitting and build. I would usually that looked like a new single family house or condos for sale in Boston. So build a 3-decker and sell them off as condos, or buy a rundown vacant 3-decker, get an architect, redesign the whole thing and do gut it and make them into like nice condos and sell those. So that was also I also did a nice project in Weymouth. That was a 14 unit. So that was a luxury development where we bought an old it was an old folks home that was no longer occupied. And we took that, tore it down, not tore it down. We did a large gut job on that with a lot of structural, and we did an addition, and then that was a pretty cool project. That was also eventually sold as condos. Um, so those were kind of like the spectrum. So it was like some single family all the way to maybe 14, 20 unit developments.
Wow, that sounds like fun. That actually does sound like fun. That 20 unit, 14 unit.
So what kind of drove so I started with single family, and then what drove me to these other projects was really the sense for curiosity. Like I wanted to know how it was like to do these bigger, more complicated projects, and I wanted to know what it was like to go through zoning and get something permitted. And that was good. I mean, I think I have a nice wide variety of experience now, which is also part of the reason why I'm like, okay, now I want to pivot and try to focus more on apartment rentals, because I feel like I got to pick one now. Right? I've done all these. Which one did I like the most? And I would probably say it would be the cash flow from the rentals. And the development's not bad. One of my favorite deals was a development deal that I never built. It was
Well, I'm gonna jump on that because actually our next question is, what's the best deal you ever did? What type of property was it? How did you find it? And how do you finance it?
great question. So good timing. So the this project, it was actually a piece of land. It was a piece of land that I got through networking. Someone had brought it to me, and I put an offer and I made it subject to permitting. So I got an architect, an engineer involved. We did all the plans. We submitted it through the proper channels to get zoning and permitting approved. Once it was approved, it was a 3 family. I had the permit in hand, and I thought, you know what? Let me just shop this around. Maybe someone's interested in this. My whole intention was to build it and sell it as condos. But I said, let me throw it out there and see what I can get for it. I threw it out there, and like within a week, I had multiple people reaching out to me that they were interested in buying this project from me. It was I got it permitted, like all the plans and permit. I think it might have been like 30, 40 grand. Um, and I mean, I had some good relationships at the time too with the architects, engineers. I was doing a lot of work with them, so I got some preferred pricing. Um, and and that includes like the permit, the actual, because there's zoning, and then you actually have to get the permit card. Anyway, we can get into that later on. But the reason why I like this deal, it was land. There was nothing there. We got it permitted, approved for a three family, and I sold the plans to another investor who wanted to buy from me and develop those plans. So without ever putting a nail in the ground, we made, I think it was about 150, $180,000 on that deal, and it was maybe like a 6 month process to get it all permitted and approved. And actually, I think permitted approved and maybe even closed. We closed that pretty quick because it was another cash buyer, and they closed like within a couple weeks.
So 30, 40 grand in. I just learned this term maybe a month ago. I've been doing this for 21 years. Shovel ready.
Shovel ready, yep.
Shovel ready. So you get this deal all wrapped up in a bow, shovel ready to package it off to a developer. And they paid 150 to 180. Where were they
That
on?
was a profit. That was a profit. I think they paid like I think yeah. I think they paid I was into it maybe for like 400,000 just about, and I think I sold it for like 600,000. It was something like that. Something like
Okay,
that. I can't
so
remember the numbers exact. It was a few years ago.
200K over 6 months.
Yeah.
That's 33,000 a month. Minus what?
Minus at the end, you pay some commissions, paid some closing costs, stuff like that. So yeah, I think it was about 180, probably 170, 180 at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was nice because with if you've ever rehabbed or developed any, done a new construction or any type of work, it's a headache. You're coordinating materials, you're coordinating labor, subcontractors. You budget and you have a time frame. You always go over budget. The time frame always extends itself. So to kind of like sidestep that process and make that nice bit of change, I was like, that's also informed my decision to remain open to development opportunities because that was quite nice.
So this is pretty cool, right? So you had the relationships. Again, real estate is a relationship business with your architects, your engineers. So you had the lot. I mean, you basically worked on a computer, made some phone calls, maybe met a couple of people there at the job site a half dozen times, whatever it was. And then this whole thing, you probably could have loaded all the PDFs and plans on a thumb drive.
Yeah,
Just like, here's your thumb drive and here's my check,
pretty
or
much.
or an email, or
Well, we
whatever it
we we
was.
scanned. No, we scanned it. It was PDFs. So we had the PDF scan because you can get those scanned from Staples.
Yep.
So we had the full size plans and everything scanned and just emailed. And the closing and everything was handled through my attorney. I already had like a power of attorney and all that stuff. So I didn't even have to show up for the closing. Which
So
is
give or take 30 grand a month
yeah.
on that deal for being well networked, being having a network of people you have a good relationship with, having a vision, getting to the end. And your original intention was to develop it, but like you said, you never even had to put a stake in the ground.
Correct. Yeah. So that was a nice experience because especially me coming from all these rehabs and flips and new construction, and I know the headache that it is to build something. So to not have those headaches and still make the money, you're like, holy shit, I stumbled onto something here.
Yeah, that was a nice problem to have.
Yeah.
So not a bad deal. 30K, your initial investment, you got all that back. So how did you fund it, the 400K?
A beautiful thing. I didn't have to. So we had it. I had just signed it under agreement, subject to the permit. So I never actually had to buy the place.
Do you know what your rate of return was on that project?
I haven't sat down to calculate it. No.
I can tell you what it is. You had zero money in, it was infinity.
Yeah, my favorite kind.
Yeah, there was no investment. Oh, okay. I take that back. You invested in your brain, you invested in yourself, you invested in the other people around you. So all these other contractors came in and they did it contingent on the sale?
Yeah. Well, I got it. No, I got it perm. No, so the relationship with the seller was with myself and another broker who had brought me the deal off market. So he wholesaled it to me. But I had, he didn't wholesale, because he couldn't tie it up, so he won a finder's fee at the back end of that. So I
Okay.
tied it up, did a purchase and sales agreement with the seller, subject to me getting the permit. So then I had to hire the architect, hire the engineer, and I would pay most of out of my out of pocket, maybe it was like 10 grand, and the rest was paid like at the sale, because some of that was like, they let me just carry it forward, because we had done other things in the past. So yeah, so that was it was again leveraging relationships. I had relationship with the architect, with the engineer, with the broker previously already. So just leveraging those. I say, hey, I got this piece of property. I wanna see what we can put on there, and I had them do their analysis. And they're like, you can do a three. Actually, it was I'm sorry, it wasn't a three, it was a four family you can put on there. That's why I got six for it.
I know.
And yeah, it was a great deal. And to be honest, I'm thinking about it. I'm like, I should just be doing that full time, finding lots to get them permitted, and selling them to other developers
You could do
and
that
let
from
them.
an island.
100%. I
Yeah.
can do that with pina colada in my hands, and
Wow. Very nice deal. So 10K in, that does change the return from infinity there. So
yeah,
I think it's,
took a hit.
yeah, it took a hit to only 1,800% return on investment.
Yeah, yeah.
If you can live with that, okay. Yeah, and really nice deal. And, I want to emphasize again, you had the brain power and the vision to see that deal because it was all on paper. It was all just in your thoughts. So your words became that reality. That's a nice story. And any of you newbies out there, you got to pay your dues. You got to learn your ropes. You got to learn your steps, and have a vision, have an idea, and then act on it. That's probably the biggest thing. Joel here, he saw the deal. To do this contingent on the permits was genius. That was really smart.
I just talked to the teller. I said, listen, it's not worth anything until we get this permitted. But I'll buy it from you, but give me the time, and you're gonna have to spend some money on it. But I'll spend it. Don't worry about it. I'll get it where it needs to be. And then thank God he saw that we were on the same page there. So yeah, that was very helpful.
So, what is the biggest hurdle you've had to overcome as a real estate investor, and how did you solve it?
Um, I think the biggest hurdle I've had in the past, maybe taking on a project and then going over budget on that project. Um, And through the relationship I had built with the lender, we were able to do like a loan modification, and to bring in the money that was needed. Obviously, the numbers still worked. So the biggest takeaway from that is buy right. So if you're buying at a good price, then a lot of the other problems tend to take care of themselves. Because I had bought at such a good price, I was able to have some flexibility with the lender, and he was able to kind of help me out on the back end there.
So, what could you have done differently walking into that deal to have seen it up front? Or, I mean, th- that's a really tough question because you don't know what you don't know. But in hindsight, walking
I
into
think
that deal, what would you have done different?
I think one of the things that needs to happen if you're doing the rehab is get your contractors in there, your subcontractors in there. Make sure that you guys are both on the same page, because sometimes when they'll give you a scope and you'll read it or whatever, there's things that are left out that you're assuming is included, or maybe you're reading something, you're interpreting something one way and they're interpreting it another. So I would say when you're going to sign off on someone's like scope of work and budget, make sure that it can be done in a way where they're sticking to it. You know what I mean? Like if it goes over, it's coming out of their pocket and not yours. So maybe have those contracts written well up front before you start the project. And even if you need to meet them there, maybe talk out the contract that's written up, so that you just make sure that you're both on the same page and both understanding it. Because sometimes when you're just reading, this when you text somebody, sometimes you can misunderstand something just based on tone or whatever. So I would say talking the contract through with the contractor ahead of time, and then making sure that it's in writing that that's the price, and that if it goes beyond that, it'll be on them.
Good, smart insights. I really, so you've got a theme here that when you're doing these deals, you have a vision, you're thinking ahead, it's like a chess match. I kind of see the way you look at a deal like a chess match. You're trying to think 5, 6, 8 moves ahead. Where could this deal go? North, south, east, west, and having that vision and having a plan. I mean, yeah, we're gonna tackle that in the next section here. But yeah, let's just jump in. I know that was a little fragmented for me, but to make the point, you've got a vision going in. You're seeing clarity. You're thinking about the different multiverses of that deal, where it could go, and then get it in writing. Have those conversations, and that's probably why you have such the good relationships, because you communicate well. You communicate that vision. So if nobody else is hearing that, communicate your vision, have good communication with your vendors. Is there a book, and I know we mentioned a couple before we got on in the green room, was there a book that had the biggest impact on you as a real estate investor?
Yes, I'm gonna have to say, I mean, I think a lot of people mention this book, and it's Rich Dad Poor Dad. Just because like from like a foundational, it's not too technical on how to do it, but just like from a mental perspective, like a mind shift was very helpful to look at this as, to look at the assets versus liabilities, and what that means for you and and that was I think that was very it was a very like elemental, like very foundational thing to understand, like that concept. So that was very helpful.
Yeah, that book, when I read it, I mean, the American dream is to own your own home. And we're all taught, yeah, your own home is your biggest asset. But the definition in the book, an asset puts money in your pocket, a liability takes money out of your pocket. So, yes, your single family home that you live in is an asset to the bank
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
until you pay for it. And even then, still, you're going to, you know, taxes, insurance, water bill, all that stuff. Now, if it generates income, like a rental property or a house hack or anything else where you're making more money than it's costing you, now it becomes your asset. So that was the big paradigm shift of that whole book, to understand the difference between an asset and a liability. And I,
Even now, like as I'm thinking like, oh, I want to live remote, I want to go move abroad. I'm thinking like, I don't want to have a single family house here that I'm now going to leave vacant or whatever, and or have to think about selling. I mean, ideally you want to have a place to come back to, so I wouldn't want to sell it. So my thought is like, okay, it has to be at least a two family because of that mindset. It's like I don't want for this to be a hole in my pocket. I want it actually to produce some money. So I wanted to at least pay for itself. If especially if I'm not going to use it, or maybe I can short term rent it when I'm not here. But it gives me options. So I think that's even till this day, I still that's very important to know.
and you can flip the script to the DR too, because when you got to go back to the States, is your DR a short-term rental, right?
Yeah, correct.
So when you're not there, it's making money. What?
That would be ideal. Correct. Yeah. Or yeah. So the idea is to how to set it up so that it's it's the most advantageous it could be to you, you know.
Yeah. And then everything becomes a business, a write-off, or an income and an expense.
And in another book that I would say more recent, that I think others would, I read it and I thought it was very well, um, had a lot of good information on like the how to, was actually a book from Brandon Turner and Brian Murray called The Multifamily Millionaire. They have volume one and volume two. Volume one is more like the 1 to 4 family, and volume two is like the larger 5+ multifamily apartment building.
Yes.
And that was a cool, I think, yeah, that kind of like put it on a nice bow, like just understanding what was different about those two different types of properties. And
Yeah, I read both of those books, and there was the light blue book, which is the smaller properties. That was Brandon's story. And he says, you become a real estate investor, or you know you're a smaller real estate investor when you know where all the properties are, know all the tenants' names and all that. And then when you switch up to the dark blue book, it's like you know you're the real estate investor when sometimes you don't even know where the property is.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
You know, and yeah, what I really loved about Brian Murray's book was the stories at the end of each chapter. Like he would leave that little cliffhanger of a deal that he was doing, and he'd bring you up to this point. It's like, okay, now what do I do? And then he'd start the next chapter, and then at the end of that chapter, he'd continue what was going on. I think that was that military base or something like that that he was doing the rehab on. And a lot of creative ideas in there on how to do the larger deals. Both of those are really good books. So now you've given me three books. I'm going to push the metal here. Is there a fourth book that you would recommend from your bookshelf?
I would say the another book that was given to me by Mike Ketch and a friend who's gone full steam ahead with the multifamily, like the larger multifamily investing, is what's it called? 10x is easier than 2x.
Yeah.
And there's actually another book from yeah, you have it right there, don't you? Yeah, it's 10x is easier than 2x by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. So, another one of that's how I ended up with Who Not How, The Gap in the Gain. Because of that, I went down the wormhole and started looking at other books. Yeah, that's exactly it. That was a really cool book to read. And the stories in there were awesome. Like I couldn't put it down. Like the examples that they gave about like Leonardo da Vinci and that was like, wow.
So I'll say something just so the camera comes on me. So here's the book 10x is easier than 2x. Dan Sullivan. Some really great stuff coming from Dan and Benjamin there. Yeah, that was very nice, and that was a good one to cap off that section here. So, what's next for you, and why not get started today?
I think maybe I'll start with why not get started today because as I'm going through this new pivot, and I'll tell you what that is in a moment, but I'm having flashbacks of when I was starting my business as full time, where I was spending so much time looking at the logo, looking at the business card, looking at the website, thinking about how I wanted it to come together. I wrote out a business plan. I was doing all these different things, but everything but going out to find that deal, right? So I think it's funny now. I think I'm my own, worst enemy and getting in my own way where, you almost want to you're always like striving for perfection or you want to you measure twice, cut once, which is helpful to an extent, but then it gets to a point where it starts to hurt you more than help. So I think that I would say that's why not now, but I'm conscious of it and I'm actively trying to break it. Actually trying to looking at a couple of new deals. So trying to get myself in that that hunting mentality again because I had been not doing that for a while, so I'm kind of like out of practice. So I'm trying to get back into that mindset.
Yeah,
But the what's new for me is I think I was last year I was having that like inventory of like what are all the things that I've done in the real estate game. What did I like, what didn't I like, and how can I double down on the things that I actually enjoyed doing. And the things that I enjoyed doing, I think, were the development side. I think it's a lot of fun to see something come from nothing, and to go put some plans together and see that come to be. So I think I'll still leave an opening for like development opportunities, but I think I'm trying to go full scale, like full focus on the larger multifamily apartments. Larger, I mean, larger is relative, but I'm saying anything five and over right now, maybe between 5 and 50 units. Ideally, I'd like to be between 50 and 150 units. Um, but I'm trying to target direct to seller opportunities, and I found that could maybe the best use of those efforts would be maybe between in the 5 to 25, 5 to 30 range of units because those are usually the ones that are going to be owned by an individual mom and pop versus the largers are going to be owned by some LLC or whatever. So I just think that just because I'm trying to do the direct to seller, I think that maybe aligns better with that. But I would like to see myself eventually get into the larger 50, 100 units.
So, all really good stuff. And I got to comment on a few things you said here. The development in multifamily, awesome. You have focus. I know that you're going to apply the same vision and genius that you do to all your deals to whatever you're going to focus on. So you mentioned like the business cards and the letterhead and all that stuff and make sure the desk is perfect. And guilty as charged. I call that business versus busyness.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
That's a,
Like, oh, I worked all day. I mean, I did the business card and I did the website and I did this. And oh, I'm so tired. I worked 10 hours. Well, did you do any deals? Well, no. So, and then there's momentum, right? I can't remember which book it was, but momentum, what do? You get out of bed and you just get started, right? I don't feel like doing this. Well, too damn bad. Put in the offer, make that phone call, right? And eventually, two or three of these will turn into the momentum. It's action, momentum, motivation. Because when you start seeing results, that's what you say, oh, wow, this is cool. I want to do more. You don't wake up out of bed saying, oh, I'm so motivated to start doing all this work that I haven't done yet. No,
yeah.
you gotta, okay, well, I'll make a few phone calls. Okay, this one went bad, this one went good. Okay, I'll do a few more. Okay, some went well. Okay, that's good. Now I'm starting to get the motivation and actually get the motivation, then you're really like pumped up to do it. So just get started, right? If you get a couple deals on your table, do the hard stuff first, right? Eat that frog, eat the elephant, right? Take a bite out of it. Get the deal out there. And then if you want to play with your logo, play with your logo. But at least you got something done. Okay, here's a curveball. This was not on your list. And I love asking this question because this goes anywhere. On today's show, what's the question I did not ask you today that I should have?
That's a good question. I'm gonna have to steal that from you. I don't know. There's a deal that comes to mind. Um, it was a bird deal. I bird that one out, and that's one that I would use as an example that I would like to use as well. On one of the deals that were kind of like a highlight. Um,
So what's another deal that you would have liked to have
yeah.
highlighted?
Oh, or actually, you know what? Maybe then I'll circle back to this one though. What's the maybe the craziest estate story? I got one for you there too. But just a quick highlight on that bird deal. It was just a nice 7 unit in Fall River. Well, nice is a big. It wasn't nice. It was an ugly looking 7 unit in Fall River, which perfect. That's the type of deals that I'm looking for, anyways. But we bought that building from an out of state owner. Wasn't doing wasn't real estate wasn't his full-time job. He had like a full-time job and he was trying to landlord and he was having a terrible time at it. So we alleviated him from his headaches and we took it. We turned over the tenants. Put good tenants in there. Did a lot of repairs and. I think I bought that place for like 400 and change. And at the end of the day, the price for almost 800,000. I bought that with a partner. I was able to buy out that partner and I kept that property for another year, then eventually sold it again. I sold it and made some money on that. So that was a cool story on just the Burr method, to be honest. And also how like I think the Burr method is almost like flipping it to yourself,
Yeah,
flipping it.
yeah.
So I think that I now want to start flipping it to myself, more than not. So that was just a story that sticks out because that was a successful situation where I had a partner, paid him off because he wanted to do something else, and the project had done so well that we were able to do that. So we were able to pay him off and to still keep going and not have to liquidate. So kept it for a few years after that, and then decided to sell for other reasons. But so that was one. The crazy story was. I once in a flip that I was doing, one of my demo contractors found the grenade, and we had to call the bomb squad, and all the workers had to leave the property, and we had to wait. This was in Lawrence. We had to wait for the state police. Everybody you can think of showed up and cordoned off the street, and we had vehicles coming in and out of there like crazy. And they actually took one of those like arm, someone went in there, took and put it in one of those like robots, took the grenade out, and they tried to detonate it in the middle of the street. Good thing it was actually turned out it was inactive. It wasn't live. But we had no idea. We just found this grenade. We're like, everybody out of the house. Let's call the cops. You know? So that was a crazy story. Finding a grenade during a demo.
Oh man.
I guess the guy before was like, like to collect those items, and he had a real live grenade, a real grenade. It had just been deactivated.
Oh God.
That was intense.
Yeah, that over 100 episodes, that's the first first grenade we've ever run into. That was a good one. What's the craziest story you ever had? I may try that one in the future. So this has been a lot of fun. It's been great to get to know you. I hope our viewers, can connect with your story and, just connect, right? Because if you can do it, I can do it. And if I can do it, you can do it. So where you started off, your story to where you are now, I mean, I ended up on an island, took me a little longer than I thought. You're going to get there a lot sooner in your trajectory. So if anyone on this show is watching this and maybe they might want to be that person that'll help you be boots on the ground. We talked about that earlier. Anybody else who wants to reach out to you, maybe they got a deal or can resonate with what you're doing and where you're going with the multifamily, the development, and building up your new businesses. How should our viewers get in touch with you?
I think the more direct way would be through email, probably. Joel Rubiera at gmail.com. I'm currently in the process of uh, building out a new website and like relaunching my social media. So email would be best for now.
Okay, perfect. So we're wrapping it up here. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our viewers before we cut you loose?
No, this was really fun. I learned a lot today. This was fun talking about this stuff. I can talk about this for hours. I'm sure you can as well. It was also nice to get the bugs out, like to be in a. I'm not one that's always, in front of talking in front of people or on podcasts. So this was kind of fun to kind of stretch that muscle and see that, you kind of just got to get out there and do it. It's kind of the same with business and real estate. You got to just get out there and do it. So that'd be my one takeaway to everybody else is get out there and do it.
Yeah, we're just a couple of real estate guys talking about stuff we enjoy, right? This is no big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Joel, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for stepping forward in the chat that we were in with Nick's group there. I had mentioned where I am and you reached right out. And because you took action, now your story is out there. You'll be able to share this. You get your virtual assistants. They want to cut up. You've said so many wonderful golden nuggets here that you can just slice those up. And what was the word you used? Drip campaign? Something
Oh,
like
drip campaign. Yeah, on the CRMs. Yeah.
that. Well, here you go. You got yourself a lot of nice content that you could use. You got a lot of nice golden nuggets in here as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for coming out to another one of our episodes. Our guest today, Mr. Joel Rubiera. Joel, any last words before our parting here?
No, just thank you for having me, Brian. I appreciate it. This was fun.
It's fun for me as well. I learned a lot as well. So, I want to thank you again. So, ladies and gentlemen, all of my real estate peeps, my rock stars, real estate entrepreneurs, this is Brian Lucier from the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, Golden Nugget, and we're signing off. We'll see you on the next one.